Welcome everyone to this year's first Research Ready Mentor Spotlight. We're really happy to have you here and really excited to be starting the year off with such a important and always timely topic with three amazing experts. So glad you could join us. I'm just going to go through a little bit of information about Research Ready before we start this actual talk. So for those of you who are less familiar with Research Ready Mentor Spotlight series, the intention, this is a CTO program that intends to share best practices and expertise from the mentors in a particular topic area. We try to feature relevant and practical topics that are aimed at research professionals such as yourselves. We have the opportunity to ask the experts anything in this live interactive session, but it's also being recorded, as you probably heard, and so that will be available on demand on our website for future use if you wanted to refer to it later. We also provide a certificate of attendance for the any participation in the live session. So if that's of interest to you, just simply complete the survey at the end of this session, and then we can respond to you with a certificate of attendance. And if you wanted to learn more about Research Ready, you can find that on our CTO website. And also you can check out next month's topics for the Mentor Spotlight. Okay, we're very excited to discuss this topic with you today, tips and tricks of inspection readiness. We have three highly experienced and passionate colleagues who will share their Health Canada inspection knowledge and experience and best practices for virtual and hybrid inspections, which they've all experienced over the past year, and you'll hear about that. They also have some great tools that they've developed and used and are happy to share with you. So as I said, this is an interactive session, so please feel free to ask questions in the chat anytime throughout the presentation. We'll stop when it's appropriate. Certainly we have lots of time at the end to have a nice discussion and answer any of your questions. If there are more questions than time permits to answer, we will capture those and send that out to the attendees, make that available to you in follow-up. So our speakers today, as I mentioned, are very experienced. We have Jennifer Lee with us, with over 13 years of experience in oncology clinical research, including team management, and over 7 years of specialization in quality assurance as the quality manager of the Cancer Clinical Research Unit. Sabrina Hamer has 19 years of clinical research experience. She joined the CHEO team in 2016 and is the quality assurance and regulatory compliance manager there. Denise Bowman is a quality assurance and education officer at Lawson Health Research Institute, and she's been working at Lawson in hospital-based clinical research for the last 8 years. So thank you, ladies, for being willing to come and share your experience with us. And without any further delay, I'm going to pass it over to you, Jen.
Hey, thank you for that introduction and welcome everybody. I'm just going to share my screen first. Okay, hopefully everyone can see that. Okay, I see a few nodding heads, so thank you. All right, so yeah, I'm very much looking forward to co-presenting with Sabrina and Denise today, and looking forward to a very engaged discussion with our audience around this very hot topic. So before I share my tips and tricks, just to give everyone a bit of background first regarding our most recent Health Canada inspection. As many of you are aware, around July of 2020, Health Canada introduced a new, and by new, it's really under quotation marks because it's not really new anymore, a cyclical inspection approach where they conduct system-based inspections of sponsor, contract research organizations, site management organizations, in addition to routine investigator site inspections. And that is with the aim of taking a fuller look at a trial's entire life cycle. We were lucky enough to have experienced this new approach in June and July of last year. And I mean, no sarcasm whatsoever. It was really a valuable learning experience. Our inspection consisted of a sponsor inspection first, which lasted 10 days. This was followed by a routine investigator site inspection, which lasted 5 days. And there were 2 inspectors for both. And the inspection covered 1 trial. This was a single site investigator initiated trial. And because we work at a cancer center, this was an oncology study. And both were routine GCP inspections, where the main focus was on systems and procedures, sponsor and QI oversight and records. We had about 3 weeks heads up before the sponsor inspection. That was the first part. And as far as inspections go, we felt that this was sufficient time to prep. If anything, the prep for the site inspection felt a little bit more stressful just because we were already knee deep in the sponsor inspection at that time, but we managed. And last but not least, this was also our first virtual inspection. As Linnea mentioned during the intro, that's kind of the focus of the discussion today. It's around this new inspection approach. So that was definitely a bit of learning curve for us as well. And we're here, I'm happy to share our experience from that. Okay, so sharing some tips and tricks. Before I go into this, I just want to preamble this by saying, you know, there is so much to share. One slide wouldn't cover it all. And we're lucky today to have a panel of speakers. So we did coordinate beforehand to make sure that our tips and tricks didn't overlap too much. Mine is going to be a little bit more focused closely on the inspection itself. So maybe does not speak as much to the overall long-term audit ready state that a study should always be in, although that is obviously very important. Okay, so jumping into it, first and foremost, communication is key. I say this in every inspection type of or audit prep workshop that I do. At the very outset, establish your audit team, which may be the same as your prep team, and also establish a process for communication, whether this would be meetings or emails or any other communication tools or a combination of those. It would be good to have some SOPs or guidelines on this so that study team can easily refer to that. There should also be a primary point of contact to centrally coordinate all of the activities. This may be one person or maybe 2 people that they can team up. At the least, roles and responsibilities should be clear to everyone. So to avoid, you know, too many cooks in the kitchen type of scenario. Daily debriefs are also extremely important. I recommend having both an internal daily debrief as well as external debriefs with the inspector. For us, on some of the days, the inspector requested to cancel theirs. Usually that's when there's really nothing much to discuss, and that's okay. And we still carried on with our internal debrief. I would also highly recommend taking copious amount of notes throughout the inspection. For us, our QA team provides this support to the study team, and always have a designated QA person join any inspection meetings or interviews to take detailed notes. We have a daily inspection summary template to capture the notes, and on the template there is also a section to track any actions that need to be taken. We share the summary with the entire audit team on a daily basis, so everyone is always up to date on how the inspection is progressing and any actions that they need to address or be aware of. And speaking of templates and tools, know your IT systems and tools, and maybe even create ones that can be helpful. Okay, maybe not IT systems, but you know, tools maybe created that can help your study team in coordinating the inspection. I will present some screenshots of these key tools that we used, and I'd be happy to share them with anyone who's interested. All right, next tip. This is basically, you know, to involve your QA department. For us, one key function for our QA team is to conduct a pre-audit review of the study. And this helped us identify any potential issues that may come up during the inspection and prepare how we may address them. It is also to help the team ensure all study documents are complete and well organized. Something that could get overlooked is to coach your main team members on the soft skills involved when communicating with the inspectors. We go through some general do's and don'ts during these coaching sessions so that study team members feel confident, first and foremost, going into these inspection interviews and know how to address matters appropriately. And when it comes to IT systems, the ones that you'll be using for the virtual inspections, in our case, we use Microsoft Teams for meetings and SharePoint for document sharing. I would highly recommend to do a pre-test of this with your inspectors. In our case, we requested a walkthrough with the inspectors, just so that there are no big surprises come day one of the inspection. You will likely still experience some small kinks in the process, but a walk through it beforehand would, save you a lot of headaches down the road. And just also for the inspector to kind of be familiar with how things look. Last but not least, the inspection is not really over just because you had an exit meeting, right? In most cases, there are likely observations that will need to be addressed. So having a robust CAPA process in place is very important. As promised, the next few slides are just a few quick visuals on some of the key tools that I wanted to highlight. As I mentioned earlier, we used MS Teams as the main communication platform for this remote inspection. Within Teams, we discovered that there is this nifty tool called Lists. It's like an app that's embedded in Teams. We were lucky to have this available to us. So we use this to internally track all of the action items during the inspection prep phase. In particular, we found that the category, progress, and the assigned to columns were really helpful. And this is a screenshot of the daily inspection summary template that I mentioned earlier. Under topics discussed, this is where the main note-taking happens, and there's a column that tracks actions. And below that, we also use the template to track any documents that the inspector requested. However, for this most recent inspection that we had, the inspectors had their own tracking tool or the document request tool. So we use that instead, and it actually worked really well. And the last screenshot I wanted to share is our CAPA template. This is the template we used to provide our responses to Health Canada. It contains some helpful prompts to guide the study team in root cause analysis and writing the individual actions. And these prompts would, of course, be removed in the final response we send to Health Canada. And with that, I'm going to pass it on to our next presenter, Sabrina Hamer from CHEO. And we'll address any questions from the audience after these presentations, and we'll have, I'm sure, a very engaging discussion. So, and Sabrina, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jen. I'll share my screen. So, Jen, I think you're still sharing. Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
So thank you for inviting me to speak today. I will be providing Health Canada inspection readiness from an academic sponsor point of view and some of the tips and tricks for inspection readiness. So inspection readiness starts before notification of inspection. It's always important to be inspection ready. We were involved in a pilot inspection of the clinical trial compliance program, so there's no transparency around the inspection that we had in 2020. But we, as Jen said, learned a lot from this inspection and we're very happy that we had this inspection, and I'll share some of the ways that we became inspection ready prior to, and some things that we do as part of our quality assurance program. So in addition to risk-based monitoring for all of our CHEO RI sponsored trials, we have developed a pre-inspection readiness review as part of our program. And so we have a checklist that we use and we share with our sponsor investigators and our coordinators to ensure that teams are inspection ready. So we conduct these reviews periodically for our trials. As well, we use this checklist for trials that are externally sponsored as well, where CHEO RI is a site. So this template gives a really great overview on areas related to trial conduct, and during this inspection readiness review, we can really focus on areas that require more support, and we can ensure regulatory compliance and eliminate any observations ahead of time. So sponsor oversight is throughout the trial life cycle. So ensuring that oversight over all of the areas, including vendors and CROs that we may be using for our investigator-initiated sponsored trials, and as well as internal departments. If you're an academic hospital, you may be using imaging or laboratory services. So ensuring inspection readiness and meeting with these departments and vendors throughout the trial life cycle is very important. So the Health Canada sponsor inspection notice that we received provided a list of key areas that would be focused on, but it wasn't an all-inclusive list. So that was pharmacy, our ECRF monitoring, data management, our trial master file, SOPs, and as well as some of the addendum SOPs that we had within our QA program. So it's really crucial during the life cycle of the trial to conduct what we call sponsor check-ins. So we check in to make sure that sponsor investigator initiated trials are their systems and processes in place to ensure that things are running smoothly, as this is a sponsor responsibility. Staying informed about changes to the regulations and creating tools and checklists to review upcoming changes and how they may impact you as an academic sponsor, as well as a site, is really important. So being ahead of these changes. So implementing new systems and procedures takes time, as we all know, and carrying out these changes just before inspection notification would be very challenging. So an example of how we ensure inspection readiness at the CHEO Research Institute is we try and stay ahead of what the upcoming changes are with Health Canada. So as part of the draft GOI 100 document, the QA team went through and reviewed all the sponsor responsibilities and just looked at how we were doing as a sponsor in areas that we may want to provide more support. So GOI 100 is a guidance document that will help anyone involved in the conduct of trials of drugs in humans understand and comply, as well as understand the interpretation of Part C, Division 5 of the Food and Drug Regulations. Ensuring resources are available to support trial conduct. This is a really important one because for our sponsor investigator trials, it's always a bit of a surprise about the amount of time that is required and resources that are required to start up a trial if someone is new to doing regulated research, for example. So we want to make sure that there's dedicated resources to ensure that we have good trial conduct and support for these studies, and then also ensuring that we are inspection ready. So this is essential throughout the trial life cycle as a sponsor. And the CHEO RI QA team is very involved in our investigator-initiated studies, and we work with our investigators to ensure that there's always adequate resources. So this would include time and staffing to carry out the trial conduct, ensuring staff are keeping on top of data collection, queries, closing out of monitoring observations, etc. And making sure that there's dedicated time to documentation, and these practices can really mitigate observations ahead of time and ensure that they're not found at the time of an inspection. So adequate monitoring can also be a really key piece to ensuring inspection readiness. I think that resources allocated to monitoring can really help ensure that trial conduct is in compliance and you're ready for an inspection. So I'll share just a slide about our Health Canada pilot inspection metrics that I gathered during our inspection. So this is a bit of a long timeline for an inspection. We had a sponsor inspection and 2 of our trials were inspected as well as for a site inspection. So a bit of a triple inspection. We had 1,491 emails between QA and the departments at CHEO and our teams and our vendors. There were 7 weeks of dedicated QA time with 2 full-time QA staff, and that accumulated to about 345 hours in which we spent on this inspection. So from November 2019 to April 2nd, 2020, we were really dedicated to this inspection. And as you can imagine, more resources went into that after the exit meeting and the trial was, and the inspection closing letter. So that's a little bit about being inspection ready from a academic sponsor point of view. And I hope that this was helpful. I'll pass it back over actually to Denise. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here today with all of you. I will start sharing my slides in a moment. This is just my little introduction slide, but Linnea did such a good job at our introductions. I don't think I need to introduce myself here, but my contact information is on the slide. If anyone does have any questions, you're more than welcome to contact me at any time. Briefly, I just wanted to give an overview of my current inspection experience to date. So in June 2021, we had a site readiness inspection. So in light of the COVID-19 pandemic, Health Canada too had to pivot with their processes and procedures and proceed in a virtual manner. And this site readiness inspection was geared to the interim order. So that would be COVID-19 drugs and medical devices. And so this was a sponsor inspection where our local principal investigator or PI was also the sponsor. And really what Health Canada was looking for was sponsor focus. So there was no review of participant source documents, medical records, anything like that. It was a mechanism to ensure the sponsor had processes and procedures in place at the start of the conduct of the trial. So Health Canada was really anticipating to come in before we had any participants enrolled. Enrollment had started. However, again, no participant documents were reviewed. And like Sabrina's experience, she mentioned there was no transparency with this specific inspection. In addition, there was no report or observations issued. Again, we had another inspection in June, and this was a pilot medical device inspection. It was a sponsor inspection. Again, the sponsor's responsible for the overall conduct of the trial, and this sponsor was external to the organization. And our site was chosen for the inspection because we were the only site in Canada participating in this trial. This was also held virtually. So there were 3 days for both of those inspections in June that were conducted with meetings over MS Teams. We did document sharing over SharePoint, and that's kind of how we supported those processes at the site. In terms of the medical device inspection, we didn't have a ton of involvement just because the only involvement of the site was really a 1-hour meeting with the principal investigator and again, supplying the sponsor with some requested documents. And so with the medical devices inspection program, this is really more of a benchmarking exercise for the regulators to see kind of where, clinical trials with medical devices are at in terms of compliance with GCP or good clinical practices and things like that. We do actually have an inspection next week, so I guess this is a little premature. Sorry, I don't have more experience to share in that regard, but I am looking forward to learning, again, having another learning opportunity with Health Canada. I think that, it's always a valuable experience, regardless of what level of conduct you're at or how much experience you have. There's always something new to learn. And so in terms of what was different or the same with a virtual inspection, I would say in terms of the process, it would be very similar to an on-site inspection in terms of the notification process. So you will receive a notice of inspection. You'll also receive a checklist with some documents that Health Canada will be requesting or you should have prepared. So that's definitely helpful to have a look at and ensure you do have all that documentation in place. What was different, obviously, is that it was conducted virtually. And so luckily we did have processes and procedures in place to support the inspection with the technology piece. So our institution implemented Office 365, I think, right at the onset of the pandemic in March 2020. And at that point in time, the way it was set up was we weren't able to allow external guest users into our Office 365 environment. So ITS had kind of put that in place near the end of 2020, and then early 2021, we had worked out our processes to ensure we could support inspections and monitoring and auditing and that type of a thing from a virtual standpoint. Again, in my experience, I have noticed Health Canada has been reaching out in advance to the sponsor to notify them or give them a heads up that they are getting a notice of inspection. I'm not sure if that is the standard process with in-person as well, but it is kind of nice to get that little advance notice. And I have been finding that, they're giving at least 4 weeks notice, which is definitely helpful if you do have a lot of paper-based documents that you need to scan into a document sharing portal. That is of great value to give you a bit of extra time. And also just wanting to share some tips and tricks with you, and we can certainly dig in a bit more into this discussion in terms of anything I've spoken about today if you're hoping to get a bit more information on any piece. But first and foremost, when you get a notice of inspection, you might not feel the greatest. You might feel a little anxious or a little overwhelmed, and that's okay. I think it's really important to just kind of take a step back and reframe your mindset and just realize this is a great learning opportunity. So certainly with time and experience, you're going to feel more confident in your abilities. But again, just kind of keeping in mind that you're the expert, like this is your protocol, you know what you're doing, and that we are all coming from the same place. So regardless if we're quality assurance or we're at the site conducting the study or we're a Health Canada inspector, that we're really keeping patient safety and data integrity at the forefront of all of our minds. And that is what we strive to do here every day when we come to work and conduct these research studies. And it's also a great opportunity to share best practices either within your organization or externally like we're doing today. So the #1 motto in clinical research, if it isn't documented, it didn't happen. I say it all the time. I'm probably like a broken record to some of you on the call today who have come to my presentations in the past, but truer words were never spoken. I'll give you an example here. So for example, protocol training. The Health Canada inspectors, they are going to look at training with the regulations, GCP, and they're also going to look for protocol training at the site. So again, I'll give the example of an investigator-initiated clinical trial where you're the sponsor and the investigator. You are wearing 2 hats, and so sometimes it's hard to separate those pieces. And you develop your protocol in collaboration with the site, and you're ready to go, and you don't formally document that training. Well, there's no evidence to really support that training had occurred or that everyone was aware of the final approved version of the protocol. And how you can tackle that is many different ways. For example, do you have slides of a PowerPoint that you presented? Do you have an agenda, meeting minutes of a meeting that you had as a team, emails back and forth in terms of, again, reviewing that protocol? All that can kind of support as evidence that this actually did occur and when and who is trained and that type of a thing. being audit ready at all times. I think, again, it's really important that when you are ready to recruit and enroll participants, that you have everything ready to go in terms of your documentation. You have your regulatory file set up, you have all your approvals, authorizations, etc. So I think it's important to recognize that there's so much work that goes into a trial before you're even starting to recruit that first participant. And certainly that helps you be audit ready at all times. You know, if you've started a study and then you realize you didn't have certain documentation or processes in place at the start, trying to put that in place and document those discrepancies is going to actually cost you more time and effort than if it had been done at the start of the study. And actually, it's interesting, Sabrina had mentioned that they had started their inspection readiness reviews at the site, and following our experience with Health Canada with the site readiness inspection ourselves, we too have decided to implement a regulatory inspection preparedness visit focused at the start of the study for our investigator-initiated regulated trials, and plan to be launching that in the next fiscal year. Lastly, follow your written procedures, but amend and reevaluate as necessary. So again, it's great if you have this well-written protocol or this well-developed monitoring plan, but if you're not actually following through and conducting the study in accordance with those procedures, that's no good either. So again, we always kind of have to reevaluate as we're going along conducting a study to say, you know, is this still working? Are we able to follow the protocol? If we're constantly missing a specific task or procedure, why is that? Does it have to do with staff training? You know, is this done clinically and it doesn't need to be part of the protocol, but initially when we were developing it, we thought it needed to be there. So again, just making sure you're following those written procedures, your SOPs, and certainly taking a look at them if you can't, you know, be compliant with those. And with that, I think I will turn it back over for discussions and questions with the group.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Sabrina and Denise, for sharing your wisdom. That was a lot of really good information. So next, we're going to just get into a panel discussion. And now is the chance for the audience to ask any burning questions you have for us. And just feel free to unmute yourself and speak up, or you can type it into the chat and we'll be monitoring. And if there are any questions, we'll kind of go over them as well. But to start, so I will be moderating this panel, and we'll have some questions for discussion. So the first question, just to kind of open it up, we talked a lot about inspection prep, especially in this new virtual environment. So I was just wondering, what are some helpful tools that your site used to prepare for this inspection? And I know in my presentation, I shared the MS Teams list tool that we found was very useful in tracking actions. I just want to share another tool that we use, which is not specific to this particular inspection per se, but like I mentioned in one of the slides, that we normally do a pre-audit or pre-inspection review. So when we do that, we use a checklist to help guide us in doing the review and making sure that we are looking at across, you know, compliance with our SOPs and policy, and of course GCP and any Division 5 regulations, etc. So this checklist, which the QA team uses, will guide that review, and you know, making sure that the study records are all in place as well. So that was a very helpful tool for us to prepare for the inspection. But Sabrina and Denise, I don't know if anything else come to mind that you'd like to highlight.
Yeah, I mean, for the CHEO Research Institute, we are a member of the Network of Networks, N2. So we did utilize the tools and templates that the Quality Committee, which I'm a member of, prepare for inspection readiness. So we did use that in preparation for our inspection. If you're a member of N2, you can utilize these tools and templates. So found it very helpful because it does have a lot of the tools that you shared as well, Jen, with regards to inspection, daily inspection debriefs and, agendas and contact information that you want to gather for all the departments that are involved in your at your site, any vendors you're working with, just keeping everybody organized and on the same page. And of course, as Denise mentioned, QA is very involved at a site. If there's a site inspection, but as well if there is an inspection at a sponsor level for the CHEO. So using these tools and templates and that N2 provides was very helpful when we were notified of an inspection. And yeah, I would highly recommend, if you're a member, to utilize those tools for sure.
I would say it was definitely helpful for with the notice of inspection to get that checklist to work off of. So, we did work with our sites to make sure, do you have all of this documentation they're requesting? Do you understand what they're asking? If there was something that was missing, then, we had a tool and template that could support the site and, document it as a late entry and put it into place before the inspection. And again, with my inspection experiences, it's been quite variable. So we don't really have a standardized process in how we tackle each inspection, just because of the nature of the inspection or the scope of the inspection. And so I think, definitely with the inspection next week, it's going to kind of help us more formalize our process here. And I thank you again, Jen, for sharing those great tools. I do actually have a direct message in the chat. I'm just going to share the question, and then the panelists can have a response here as well. So in terms of signatures on the training log, can we obtain this as e-signature or only in person? Do you know what Health Canada says about this? So this is a very great question. Definitely in the virtual world we're living in right now too, that we're not always in person. Before we're always obtaining, those wedding signatures. It's just important to realize, if you are the sponsor and you are using an electronic platform, that your platform must be validated. So, copy and pasting a signature on in a Word document is really insufficient in terms of, I don't know if that person actually applied their signature. I don't know when they applied it. So again, having those user controls and audit trails in place would again support that it's the actual individual applying their signature to the document. And I will let Jen and Sabrina jump in if they have anything to add here.
Yeah, and I would agree with that, Denise. Health Canada in their Guide 100 has pretty clear guidance around validating the electronic system that you're using in your clinical trial. So I would say that e-signature would be fine as long as the e-signature system is a validated electronic system and you have the necessary documentation to show that. That's what Health Canada looks for. And, I would recommend having an SOP around the use of e-signatures in clinical trial. Sabrina, feel free to add to that if you have anything else.
I think you both covered it very well.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I do want to highlight, sorry, Jen, that if you haven't read Guidance 100, that we really encourage you to do that. Essentially, it's Health Canada's interpretation of how they're applying the regulations in GCP, and, it will help you avoid some potential inspection findings as well.
Yeah, and I see that Janet has her hand up. Go ahead, Janet.
Hi, everybody. So this question is more, I guess, for Jen and Sabrina. What support do you offer your sites or your investigators who are having an inspection with an industry sponsor? I know when you're essentially the sponsor or you're supporting an investigator-initiated trial, obviously there's probably less oversight to so you fill in those gaps as the QA team. I just wondered if it is an industry-sponsored study, do you ever feel that there's conflict between what you would want to support versus what the sponsor themselves support? Do you work together? Do you have any processes in place to be able to coordinate that with the sponsor? Any thoughts on that?
Sure, I can start. So we did have inspections in the past where it's an industry-sponsored trial. I would say overall, based on our experience, it's very important to have a very well-established relationship with the sponsor, just in terms of how we are going to be approaching the inspection. So we normally have like right away, a meeting with the sponsor right after we get the notification, just to have a discussion about site readiness and just how we're going to be coordinating the inspection. I think luckily in our past experience, the sponsor comes from a very supportive approach. We didn't necessarily, felt like the sponsor was territorial or had to do it like their way or the highway. They were very respectful. And, I think having good SOPs at the site and just around your site operations really helps with that, because then it gives the sponsor confidence that, you have the necessary documentation and plan and approach in place. So that's kind of how we went about it, but we involved the sponsor. It's a collaboration, and they gave us very good support throughout the entire inspection. So I'll start off with that. I don't know if Sabrina or Denise has anything to add.
So I personally don't have any experience with supporting an externally sponsored study with an inspection, but within our contracts, we obviously have a collaborative approach and notification if we were to be selected as a site for an inspection. And we do have already good relationships with our externally sponsored studies, in which we share if we're doing a pre-inspection readiness review. If we are doing an audit, we may share some things that we can help support the site and further support trial conduct. And so, like Jen's saying, it's very collaborative. We all have the same goal and the same values in mind, of conducting good research to help our patients and participants. So in the event that we were notified of this, we would definitely reach out and have a collaborative working style to the inspection, and we'd really facilitate a lot of the administrative support and making sure that the site and the sponsor had what they needed administratively, but also understanding the processes at our institution and the teams that are involved, and anything that would help support the inspection from our quality management system point of view. So that's how I foresee it in the event it would be happening at CHEO, but I hope that's helpful in what I've shared, Janet.
All right, thank you.
And we have another hand up. Kate, go ahead.
Hi, thank you all for your presentation. It's been really insightful. Jennifer, you spoke about SOPs for the audit process. I just was wondering if you were able to elaborate. So were these SOPs something that you used internally as the sponsor, or were able to provide to the site so that if they had a site initiated audit, that they would have a process to follow? So I just was looking for more detail on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we do have an SOP on audits and inspections that basically just outlines more the logistical steps involved, like, who to notify and the communication channels and just general steps and expectations in terms of getting all your study records in place and things like that. And we follow that for all of our site audits and inspections, which is the most commonplace. And then most recently we had the sponsor inspection, and that's been more rare for us. And we kind of follow just the same process for that. We haven't really had the experience of supporting another, like we haven't had a sponsor inspection on a multi-site IIT. I would love to hear anyone with experience on that. But, you know, I'm sure when the time comes, if the site is seeking some guidance from us in terms of how to prepare their documents and how to go about it, like we'd be happy to share that SOP with them. And I think the other times that I mentioned SOPs, I think I was more generally just referring to, you know, having an SOP on delegation log and training and just having those SOPs in place to you know, demonstrate inspection readiness and you know, like when we do our pre-audit reviews and things like that, we have something to review the studies against. Hope that answers your question. And as always, Sabrina, Denise, feel free to add.
No, absolutely. That did answer my question. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Actually, I have a question, Jen and Sabrina. I'm wondering, so our inspection next week is a site inspection. Again, it's the sponsor investigator, but this time from the site view, not the sponsor view. And in terms of your follow-up with, you know, observations and CAPAs and things like that, I'm just wondering how involved your QA program is in that. Does it depend if it's the site inspection or the sponsor inspection? Would you tackle different observations depending on where those responsibility lies? Like, I'm just hoping you can share kind of your experiences with that to date.
Yeah, if I understand the question, so as part of our pilot inspection, we had two sites that were, or two studies that were selected, and the QA team was heavily involved in helping with the corrective action, preventative action around the observations. So some of them may be related to sponsor support and systems and processes that we need to put in place so that the teams are able to carry out the trial according to the regulations, et cetera. But we definitely would be supportive of the team, making sure that there's documentation that's clear and concise, and we understand what the root cause is. So as part of our support for those investigator initiated studies, it's always important to get to that root cause analysis so that you know, the preventative action that's being put in place doesn't reoccur. So we were very involved in with the teams with our pilot inspection. So does that answer your question?
It does, yes. I can foresee us kind of supporting in the same way, but just interested to learn what your experience was.
Yeah, and I would say that our model is very similar to Sabrina's. We provide guidance. That's kind of our main focus. And there are times when we kind of act as kind of like the central coordinating body to get everyone together to have discussions and maybe asking some key questions. And I find that a lot of times asking the right questions always tend to lead to better CAPAs. And then the more system process focused CAPAs, I would say that QA tends to be more heavily involved in and maybe take ownership of. Another thing I want to add is just as a kind of added tips and tricks, it's very helpful for like one team or one person to centrally keep track of all of the CAPA action items. Because some of them kind of go on for a few months to, you know, several months down the road from when you first write the CAPA. So it's really important to ensure that you're basically all the things you promised you would do, that you kind of follow through on them. So it's good to keep track of all the actions kind of centrally, and then, you know, reach out to those individuals and follow up accordingly. And in our case, like QA took on that role of keeping track of all of the CAPAs.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, I don't see any other questions. We have about 11 minutes left, so we're just gonna keep going with some of our panel discussion questions. So I'm going to kind of skip over to another key question I think would be an interesting discussion. How was the relationship with Health Canada different for a virtual inspection versus an in-person inspection? And maybe I'll have Denise. I don't know if you like to share that. I know you've kind of had a mix.
Yeah, of course. So again, the intention of our inspection that's scheduled next week was potentially going to be a hybrid inspection, just because there is kind of a heavy paper base in terms of those source documents, and there is a lot of time that needs to be dedicated if you are needing to scan those documents into a sharing platform. But I found, virtually everything went smoothly, like you had mentioned earlier, Jen, in terms of testing those systems, making sure you have that access set up in advance goes a long way. For example, we have kind of a complex process for reviewing the electronic medical record, which is PowerChart, by which we enable with ITS a virtual desktop for the inspectors and then temporary credentials to PowerChart. And so again, we were operating in kind of those existing technologies and procedures we had in place, but applying it in a different way to support an inspection. And I imagine it can be quite confusing sometimes for the inspectors because they're working with a lot of different groups, organizations, institutions, a lot of different technology processes in place. And I think it goes a long way just to make sure they are kind of all set up and ready to go at the start of the inspection and, can provide that ongoing technical support. But it was really easy just because we did use Office 365, Teams, and SharePoint. We're very familiar with it as an organization, being able to use that, for over a year in advance of having those inspections in June 2021, I think really went a long way. And I feel like the study teams are also getting more comfortable with it, utilizing it on a daily basis kind of a thing. The inspectors, I think, are also familiar with Office 365, so that was really great. There was no issue with us, suggesting to use our instance. We actually have another inspection in February, but it's an external sponsor, and we're the only site in Canada. And I think those inspectors are maybe from Quebec. They're, because it's virtual, that I think they're kind of crossing the borders of the provinces, and we're not always getting the same inspectors. So initially they had asked to use a box type of a drop system, and our policy is we can share the participant documents over SharePoint because it meets our privacy risk security requirements, and they again were amenable to that once they kind of knew what we were talking about. So potentially there's different systems depending on the province you're in as well. But yeah, I found it a great experience, and they just kind of set a meeting for the whole duration of the inspections with anticipated times for opening meeting and at the beginning of the day, and then a closing meeting at the end of the day with those times. And yeah, so it was great.
Okay, great.
So our pilot inspection was completely paper-based and on-site over 5 days with 2 compliance specialists. So we didn't have anything that was particularly from the trials shared in advance, other than just some administrative items that Health Canada had asked as part of their review of our academic institution. However, just to add to this, in the event that we are, notified of an inspection in the future, we are working with privacy and our REB to assess the risk of using REDCap Sendit. So REDCap Sendit is a secure data sharing software. And so we are reviewing that system thoroughly. It's been going through a review for some time now, and I think we're getting at a point where we're ready to pilot it. And we've had our legal team involved as well, just to ensure that the documents that will be shared as part of the trial are low risk. We use a remote system that's set up for the electronic medical record. So that's all through a different system. Patient records in the medical chart are not shared via REDCap Sendit. It would be lower risk items that are de-identified, such as source, paper case report forms with the study ID and limited information, as well as the regulatory documents, which we know can be shared by other methods, by secure email, etc. So we haven't had that experience, so I will most likely be reaching out to folks if that ever happens. But I think we're in a really good place that we're near ready to use REDCap Send It. So I hope that it'll be a good experience.
Okay, great. And for us, I think it sounds a little bit more nuanced, but you know, I think it's not surprising to say is part of the difference with virtual inspection is sometimes, you know, things get glitchy, and it can lead to some awkward moments when things get glitchy. And there were a few times when you know, someone on the meeting were having connection problems, so then dropped out all of a sudden. So I think just kind of expecting that could happen and just, you know, stay calm, and is not a uncommon thing to happen, and just kind of manage as we go, and we can get back on track, and that's all fine. So that was one of the main things for virtual versus in person. Obviously, for I think most remote inspections, they obviously, when they can't come on site, they can't have, you know, some of the tours that they normally would conduct. So that may mean that you would need to provide some documentation that you may normally not provide, or just, you know, more records that they can't visually see, and you just need to provide more. So for us, one of the things that stood out more was a lot of calibration maintenance records. The inspector basically requested, you know, all the records that cross path with the trial. So that took some time to try to compile all of the records and compile all of them onto a document, make it organized and presentable to the inspector. So you may just, you know, expect some more work in terms of providing documents. And Denise and Sabrina also mentioned that, you know, you may expect a lot more prep time going into a virtual inspection, just in terms of scanning, uploading records. Yeah, but overall, we found, just from a personal level, the communication and relationship with Health Canada we were able to maintain that. We didn't find that the virtual inspection was crippling in any way. We were still able to have very good conversations. I think another, again, a nuanced tip that I may have is, you know, sometimes when you're in a virtual meeting, the other side might not be aware of what you're looking at. So, you know, just verbalizing what you're looking at, or what you're doing. If you're typing notes and you're silent because you're typing notes, it would be helpful to just say, oh, excuse me, I'm typing notes, and, you know, I'm thinking, or something like that, just to let them know that, you know, why you're silent, or just giving them those kind of cues, just because, you know, you can't read that type of body language when you were in person. So so yeah, so those are some of our experiences to share.
Oh, Jen, actually, just
Yeah.
to add, and I think this was your experience as well with the virtual inspection, that Health Canada did pre-specify the participants in advance. Again, I don't know if that is going to be kind of common practice if something's conducted fully virtually or not, but they were able to let the team know, like, these specific participants, so then the research coordinator didn't have to, you know, scan all 25 participants. It was 3 participants, and that kind of, again, lightened the load.
Yep, that's great. Yeah, we kind of did the same. All right, we're like coming up to 2 o'clock. I felt like this hour was not nearly enough. This is a really good discussion, and hope it was informative for our audience. So I'll hand it off to Linnea to wrap up the session. Thanks.
Thanks, Jen. I'd really like to thank all the speakers. That was amazing. We all need to be sharing our tips and tricks and best practices. So thank you for spending the time compiling that and sharing it with us today. I'm happy to tell everybody that these speakers are also, you know, willing to connect with you afterward. If you heard of some technology that you want to learn more about, or you saw a tool that would be really interesting to you, we can help facilitate that connection if you don't already have that information. So I'd just like to encourage you to take a minute to complete the survey once we close out of this call. and especially if you want a certificate of attendance. And please also check out the topic for February's Mentor Spotlight on our CTO website. Thanks again. Have a great day.